Would you rather have a Ford or a Porsche? This isn't quite as silly a question as it sounds.
No, really, it's not. Consider that the cheapest Porsche Taycan you can buy costs £72,850, and the super fast Ford Mustang Mach-E GT costs £67,225.
That's just £5,500 difference, or £75 a month on a lease. Ooh.
Both are pure electric cars that will be more fun to drive than average. So you really do have a choice, top spec Mach-E or basic Taycan. Let us know your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe. But come on, which one would you choose?
So what do you get for your money? Well, on the one hand, you could get this, a Ford Mustang Mach-E GT. Now this is a 5-seat SUV that comes with 2 motors, all-wheel drive and enough power to make yourself sick. It's a fun, practical sports utility vehicle. On the other hand, and for very nearly the same money as the Ford, you could have something like this, a base spec Porsche Taycan. Now this only has 1 motor that drives the rear wheels, it's got a smaller battery, less range and far fewer gadgets than the Ford. But it's a Porsche. It's a svelte, sexy sports saloon. And that's got to mean something, right? It certainly means that you get a much slinkier car than the Mach-E, because this is a 4-door pure electric sports saloon that looks pretty much like all the other Taycans in the range. Nearly. You get 19-inch wheels as standard. These are actually the optional 20s, so don't be fooled, people, as well as quite a few less flashy bits on this least expensive Taycan. The one thing you will notice as well, this being a 4-door saloon with a boot, is that is actually a less convenient shape than on the Ford Mustang Mach-E.
It is actually bigger in here than it is in the Mach-E with the seats fully up.
Also, it has a very handy 84-litre frunk. And the 84-litre frunk in the Taycan is actually quite handy.
But the Ford also has a big frunk. Plus, it's a hatchback SUV with easy-to-fold rear seats, so it's more practical and higher than a Taycan.
The GT gets these really cool 20-inch rims as standard. It's also got more vents in the front bumper. It's got a black grille and then black wing mirrors and a black roof. But it's not silly or obnoxious, despite this car actually having more power than Ford's own GT supercar. But come on, there's not really any surprises here, is there? The Porsche is a bit more slinky and the Ford is a bit more practical. Tell me something I don't know. To make a decision, I think I'm going to have to dig below the surface. Now this is where the Porsche really scores highly, because it has some of the best interiors in the business. In front of me here, I've got this kind of gently curved 16.8-inch digital display, and then there's another touchscreen here in the middle with the rest of the other bits. Even if you ignore some of the options on this particular car, you do get, as standard on the base version, electric heated seats. You also get a heat pump as standard, you get a phone app, you get climate control, you get the full suite of driver assistance systems. I thought this car might be a little bit under-equipped because it was the lowest one. I was wrong. It's also solidly put together with nice materials, brilliant fit and finish, and it's very, very elegant. I thought this car might come with nothing, but it is not under-equipped.
But you do need to be careful here, because Porsche can catch you out with the optional extras. Purple leather vegan seats, as you can see here, will cost you £2,500, and even the Porsche Sport Sound will cost you £345. Outside, if you want any colour other than white or black, it costs you money. Want different wheels? They can cost up to £5,500. Carbon trim for the outside, that's £5,808. And if you want more range and performance, the bigger Performance Battery Plus costs just over £4,000. Believe me, the options can become very expensive very quickly. The Mach-E, on the other hand, well, it's much easier to work out. Black is the standard no-cost option colour, but everything else is £1,150. I'd go for Grabber Blue or Cyber Orange. After that, you can option a panoramic roof for just under £1,000, but the rest is pretty much included.
You get these GT-specific seats, which I actually find really comfortable. A 15-inch display in the dash, which is portrait, and I still think just looks like it's been nailed onto there. And then a widescreen information display in front of you. It's not quite as posh feeling as the Porsche, but you cannot argue with the amount of kit that the Ford gets as standard. It's things like a full suite of driver assistance systems that you don't have to pay extra for. You've got the usual Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. You've got heated electric everything. You've got loads of USB ports. It's just a really nicely spec'd car, and you don't have to tick too many options boxes. If you were to specify the Porsche with the same kit as the Mustang Mach-E gets as standard, the prices would be very, very different. So the Mach-E starts to look like quite a lot of value if you like gadgets, pushing it very slightly ahead in this 2-horse race. But what about charging, I hear you ask? Well, that's a very good point.
Our Ford Mustang Mach-E GT gets Ford's biggest 91 kilowatt-hour battery, and that means a very respectable range of 310 miles. But it only gets 150 kilowatt DC charging. That's not bad, but considering the size of the battery, you'd think Ford could have ramped it up a bit. It results in 10 to 80% in 43 minutes on a 150 kilowatt rated charger or above.
Which is okay. Now, the Mach-E GT gets 11 kilowatt AC capability, which is fine, but seeing as that's industrial power, you're more than likely to end up waiting the 14 hours it takes to fully charge it on a home wall box. It is a big battery though, so you are getting quite a lot of range for that. There's also no heat pump available on any Mach-E, so you'll be wanting to use that Ford Pass app for your mobile phone so that you can precondition the battery whenever you can.
The Porsche, on the other hand, gets a much smaller battery than the Ford at 71 kilowatt hours, and that means only 268 miles of range. You can order up a more powerful and bigger 83.7 kilowatt hour Performance Plus battery to give you just over 300 miles of range, or upgrade to 22 kilowatt AC home charging, but that will cost you over $4,000. There's those optional extras again.
For the Taycan that compares most closely in price to our Mustang, you are talking about the lower figures when it comes to range and at-home charging speeds. But there is good news, because even though this is the base of the range, it gets the same 800-volt architecture as the Porsche Taycans, which means that if you can find a big enough public rapid charger, you can charge up to 225 kilowatts. That's fast.
That means the Taycan will do 10 to 80% in just 21 minutes. So even though you're not getting the same range as the Mach-E GT, you're putting it into the car half as fast again.
The result? Well, you may have to stop more in the Porsche, but you'll stop for about half the time, as long as you can find fast enough chargers. But to be honest, it does feel slightly like the Mustang still has a bit of an edge. But wait a moment. We have not considered what is possibly the most important part of this test. Yes, that's right, the driving. Now, you'd think that the Porsche would be faster, or at least on par with the Ford, right? Wrong, because this car has about 400 brake horsepower, so it gets from 0 to 62 miles an hour in about 5.4 seconds.
The Mach-E gets 2 motors, all-wheel drive, 480 brake horsepower and 0 to 62 miles an hour in 3.7 seconds.
Yes, and also, that 400 brake horsepower is actually only fully available in the Taycan when you're doing a drag race style launch. When you're just pottering about, it only has 326 brake horsepower, which is still enough, it's just not the same as the Ford. The Ford also has well over twice the torque. Now that's the force that you feel when you're accelerating. It's the stuff that really pushes you back in your seat. And it does make the Ford feel much faster in day-to-day driving. Just don't tell the Porsche I said that.
And yet, this Porsche is a bit lighter and much more precise. It's got better steering, more feel from the brakes. It just feels more lively and connected to the road. It drives like a Porsche, and that's saying something. The Mach-E might be outrageously powerful for a 5-seat SUV, but it's a little bit of a hammer compared to the scalpel that is the Taycan.
But that kind of doesn't matter for the Mustang, because everywhere it goes, this car is finding traction. It's got all-wheel drive, it's slightly rear biased, which you can feel, but every little straight like this is just gobbled up by the speed. It just disappears. Now, it's got these 3 modes, Whisper, Active and Untamed, so you can find a kind of ride and throttle response compromise that suits you best. I like Whisper, which is the calmest setting, surprisingly, but then there's Active, which is kind of in the middle, and then Untamed, which I'm obviously going to press because I'm a child. Yeah, more throttle response, a lot more noise. You can hear it growling away like some sort of digital jet. The suspension's a lot firmer, as you may have just noticed. It's very good. But strangely, the acceleration does seem to tail off after about 50-60 miles an hour. So it's got that initial burst of real brawny, aggressive acceleration, and then it sort of pulls itself back. Probably save your license. It's a bit of a mishmash. This car, it does a lot of things well, but it doesn't excel at any one of them. It doesn't make your heart beat faster, apart from the fact it's really fast. It's like a roller coaster. Do you know what? I sound like I'm being vague. I need to make a decision.
I don't actually think that the Mustang Mach-E GT is the best Mustang Mach-E either. I'd rather have the big battery, all-wheel drive standard Mach-E, because these super powerful SUVs, they seem to be always at war with their own physics. They're very, very fast, but they're not that fun. Which means, if I'm going to make a decision based largely on how they drive, then I'm unsurprisingly going to choose the Porsche Taycan. I'd rather take a hit on the performance and a slight hit on the practicality, because this is, at the end of the day, a much more satisfying driver's car.
Do you agree? Would you rather have a ballistic Ford SUV or an electric Porsche saloon? Let us know in the comments, and please do like and subscribe. And if you want to know anything at all about any kind of electrified car, then please do log on to electrifying.com and we'll do our best to help.